Perhaps problems were inevitable. I was a natural scientist, a physicist if you ask me, and Tilly was an economist and in the social sciences. We didn't work in those fields, but our college majors spoke volumes about how each of us thought. I believed in absolutes. Not all of them, but there are many things that are true regardless of circumstances. The laws of nature, like gravity, for example. Tilly believed in truths too, but in her mind, there was always room for exceptions, even for gravity. It's always true, Till. Gravity is unchanging. For now. You can't believe that somewhere out there in this infinite universe, there isn't a single instance where it might not act? Not a single chance. Then we laughed. Neither of us ever convinced the other, but we enjoyed the companionship. We had a good marriage in that sense. We weren't going to compete with Gates or Bezos for money, but I was getting into big data management through actuarial analysis, and Tilly was running a sales team of 24 people at a regional brokerage firm that was growing like crazy. We had enough money for both the present and the future. We had a nice 4-bedroom house with a pool and hot tub, and we shared a mortgage on a cabin up north with Tilly's sister Margie and her husband Nate, so we had somewhere to escape to when summer came and the temperature rose. Our oldest daughter, Annette, Annie, was going into first grade, and our youngest, Kylie, was just dropping diapers. Each was not only completely adorable, but also energetic and obedient. I hinted at a third child, perhaps a boy this time, but Tilly showed no such enthusiasm. And that was great. She'd had to carry children, and after Kylie, it had taken her almost 2 years to get back to her fighting weight and tone. I understood why she was hesitant. It certainly wasn't a deciding factor for me. Our marriage was well balanced. Sometimes I was on top of things, taking more than I gave, when I had a big project at work or when my dad had a stroke and my mom needed my help around the house. But just as often I was down, giving more so Tilly could handle a business trip for new prospects or stay with her sister for a week after Margie was diagnosed with breast cancer. I think we'd both say the scales eventually balanced out. So where did we go wrong? The seeds of our discontent were sown from the very beginning of our relationship. We were who we were, but I don't think either of us believed that about the other. We assumed our differences wouldn't be profound, and so I guess we didn't discuss our expectations fully enough. I loved her and she loved me. What else mattered? As it turned out, much more. At least that's how it seems to me now. Who knows if it's true? Tilly always understood people better than I did. Even if we took a wrong turn in the beginning, it took a while for it to show up. Years, really. We lived quite happily, unaware of the crack that lay beneath our marriage. Daddy, why don't Kylie and I go too? Annie was very evolved and more than a little spoiled. Tilly and I adored both of our children and were far more likely to take them with us than leave them in the care of a babysitter or our own parents. But Tilly was about to be recognized by the CEO of her firm for bringing in 3 very large clients, a software titan, and 2 family offices that together controlled more than $2 billion in assets. And we decided to spend the night at the hotel where the celebration was being held. Because this party is for adults only, honey. But I promise that tomorrow night we'll go out to celebrate as a family. Okay? I wish I could go with you. I know, sweetie, but tomorrow night you're going. Fate is too often decided by inconsequential details, little things that are like blood cells flowing through our bodies, abundant, omnipresent, and individually almost trivial. Almost. I parked the car, Tilly's midnight blue BMW 5 Series sedan, and we were on our way up the elevator when I realized I'd forgotten my parking ticket. If it had been a municipal parking lot, I would have just paid $5, but at this hotel you had to pay $40 for overnight parking. So I kissed Tilly as the elevator pulled up to the lobby, escorted her out, and then pressed the button to return to the second level. I walked through the doors with my ticket in my coat pocket about 5 minutes after Tilly entered. I saw that she had already shed her coat and was talking to a tall man in a dark suit and another woman in a silk dress of a rich green color. The woman was long and slender and athletic, but Tilly outshone her. My wife wore classic clothes of high quality and wore them with confidence. Her proportions were almost perfect, both facial features and physique. She looked feminine, with full curves that she maintained with hours of exercise almost every day, but it was the intelligence in her eyes, the amusement in the curve of her lips that won my heart. And as I saw her across the room, I felt that familiar wave of love for her ignite in my heart, and in other places too. It was fitting that it was at that moment that the lie was exposed. I see Tilly didn't bring her husband. Do you think Randy is going to bug her again tonight? I stood at the coat rack, and the two men turned away just as I slipped behind them so they didn't see me. I remembered Ted Masters. He'd been on Tilly's team for 3 years. I didn't recognize the other man, but I did recognize Randy. He was the tall man who'd been talking to Tilly. And I'd never experienced anything like what I was feeling at that moment. Certainly not before, and certainly not later. I knew I was in unfathomable pain, an agony that would never be able to pull me out of its grip. The wound was so deep and all-consuming that I doubted if I could survive it. I didn't know how I would cope with it, and yet I didn't feel it. My instinct for self-preservation turned on with renewed vigor. It immediately shivered in agony, and while I wouldn't be able to tolerate her forever, I wasn't about to let myself be humiliated. I don't know if this is true for all men, but I didn't want to show my vulnerability in public. My mind was far from clear, but survival mode allowed me to make decisions I remember with gratitude. I approached Tilly with a grim expression on my face that she didn't immediately notice. Check your clothes at the front door, dear, and please bring me a glass of white wine on your way back. I didn't waste time or words. I'm leaving, Tilly. She looked at me perplexed. I wouldn't want to get in the way of Randy fondling you tonight. Again. Randy spat out the whiskey he'd just drunk. Tilly's eyes widened and she stared at me. But when she looked me in the eye, she saw that I knew about her affair. Her face drained and her eyes filled with tears. Oh no, she whispered, quietly horrified, as I turned and walked away, passing Ted Masters, who had heard everything I had said. He looked white as a sheet. Air, called out Tilly. Please wait a moment. I'll get my coat and be there in a second. I ignored her and kept walking. I quickly made my way down the stairs. I wasn't going to run, but I didn't hesitate either. I drove out of the garage without noticing her, and stayed so short that I didn't have to pay for parking. Who says the universe doesn't bend toward justice? Thank God the girls stayed the night at Tilly's parents' house. As I drove, I made plans. At worst, I had a 4 or 5 minute head start. If she apologized to her supervisors, I had a couple more minutes. If she had to wait for a hitchhiker or cab, that could give me up to 10 more minutes. Anyway, I couldn't spend much time at home. Like any wounded animal, I wanted to get somewhere safe, somewhere where no one would see my suffering and shame for breaking me. Because I knew it would break me. Soon. I needed to pack my things and leave, but I wasn't sure I'd have time to do it before Tilly came home. I knew my work capacity wasn't anywhere near peak performance, and I definitely wasn't ready to meet her. Then I laughed. I didn't need to drive home. I had an overnight bag in my trunk. I wasn't going to hide, but I wasn't going to make it easy on myself either. I found an ATM and withdrew the maximum amount, then found a residence inn where I paid cash for the night. I turned off my phone and left it in my room and headed to the Red Robin next door for a burger and salad and a draft beer. But only one. I never saw the point of excessive alcohol consumption. The data unequivocally spoke against it. I didn't need to punish myself. The pain was perfectly fine with that. I lingered at the Red Robin. As long as I was in public, I thought I could parry the pain effectively enough to pretend everything was fine. I was afraid to be alone in my room, but I was drawn there nonetheless. My facade was about to crumble. I left the bills on the table and walked out. The waitress would have been thrilled with the tip, but I didn't think I'd survive the wait for change. As soon as I was outside the closed door, sobs overwhelmed me. I grabbed a pillow off the bed and cradled my face in it. A howl erupted from the depths of my devastated heart, and if anyone could have heard it, I'm sure it would have shaken them to their core. I screamed and cried, giving vent to the agony that was wrenching my insides and tearing my heart. I don't know how long I screamed into the pillow, but when I finally collapsed to the floor, it was wet with saliva, tears, and mucus. I tossed it into the corner. 3 more lay on the bed, and 2 were stashed on a shelf in the closet. I knew I would need at least some of them before I left in the morning. Next chapter, I devastated my husband. I'm leaving, Tilly. I wouldn't want to get in the way of Randy fondling you tonight. Again. Aaron's voice was cold, but his eyes betrayed his pain. He knew. My breath caught. I wanted to reach out, to pull him close, to use my love to soothe his grief. But instead, I froze. I don't remember if I said anything at all while our eyes stared at each other, but when he turned away and walked roughly past Ted, I snapped out of my stupor. Air, please wait! I'll get my coat and be with you in a second. He continued walking. I followed him. I thought about apologizing to Jim and Frank, but at the moment, work was way down on my priority list. Nothing mattered but Aaron. I walked quickly to the coat closet to retrieve my coat and then pressed the elevator button to the garage. I know it wouldn't do any good, but I pushed the button every few seconds until the doors opened. Once in the garage, I saw after a few seconds that my car was gone, so I took the elevator back to the lobby and went out the front doors. Cabs were scarce, so I called Lyft using my phone. Ahmad and his blue Prius arrived 4 minutes later. The 20-minute ride felt like the longest ride of my life. I texted Jim and Frank, letting them know that Aaron was suddenly ill and expressing my regrets. I immediately received messages in response, expressing their disappointment that we would miss this recognition, but also their understanding. They both hoped that Aaron would feel better soon. Having accomplished this task, I turned back to Aaron. So many thoughts collided, but my main thought was more of a fear. I knew Aaron saw everything in black and white. That had never been a problem. I loved him for his clarity and honesty, and for his intelligence, and his playfulness, and his devotion to our girls, me, and our family. But where I saw convention, he had confidence. Of course, I didn't know what the future held, but I realized that it would be much harder for him to move forward than it would be for me if circumstances were different. But of course, they wouldn't have changed. His loyalty to me was absolute. My commitment to him was just as strong, but sexual fidelity seemed unimportant to my marriage. It didn't stop us from spending time together. It had no effect on my feelings for my husband, which grew stronger and fuller each day. I could be fully committed and still have casual flings as long as it didn't involve Aaron, the girls, or anyone else in our family. Not that I was a slut. I had first hooked up with Randy about a year before, almost 2 years after he joined the firm. We'd only had fun twice more since then, always on the road, and not even on every trip. We've never spent the night together. I never left town with the thought of having fun with Aaron. It only happened by coincidence. Since I'd gotten married, I'd only had one tryst, a one-night stand with a stereotypical salesman from a manufacturing company. Thus, in 5 years, I've had 4 liaisons, for a total of 2 or 3 hours. It was nothing special. I've had a lot more massages than that. But I knew Aaron looked at it differently. When Ahmad dropped me off, the house was dark, and there was no sign that Aaron had been there since we'd left no more than an hour ago. I moved through our house, the house we'd inhabited with Annie and Kylie, the house we'd filled with memorabilia from our families and our life together. I was sad and scared. Sad that our memories would now include this wound, and scared of the changes it would mean for our marriage, for our children, for our family. It will be a long time before our lives are back to the way they were, if it ever does. I changed into comfortable sweatpants, put on my sheepskin boots, and went to the family room to wait for Aaron. I had no new messages, and we never did a search for my phone, so I couldn't tell where he might be. I thought about what to say to him, but I couldn't think of anything. We needed to talk. Despite my reaction at the hotel, I knew how to handle moments, and I was always more effective when I could see and feel the nuances in tone, eye contact, body language. If I could sit across from Aaron, or better yet, next to him, I could see, hear, and feel his reaction to our conversation. I didn't know if I could convince him of my views, but I had a better chance in person. So I waited for him, no matter how long it took. But I also wanted him to know that I loved him and that he was the most important person in the world to me. I thought for almost 15 minutes, typing at least a dozen messages before I settled on one simple one. Please come home to talk to me. I love you. Then I waited. Next chapter. I slept surprisingly well. I had one more bout of screaming before I fell into a dreamless sleep. It was still early when I woke up, but as far as I could tell, I'd been out for about 9 hours. I guess the emotional exhaustion was taking its toll, but I still felt out of sorts, like I was trudging through mud, both physical and mental. I took a shower but didn't shave. It was about 7:30 when I headed to the original pancake house. The coffee was fresh and hot, and the pancakes were lighter than I expected. The only thing I didn't like was the sausage scone. It was particularly greasy. But the bill didn't exceed $20, and I left another generous tip. I was feeling restless. My usual workout was a jog, but I had no workout clothes, and I had completely forgotten to bring another pair of shoes. But I didn't feel like sitting in my hotel room, so I put on a couple of t-shirts, a shirt from the night before, and a sweatshirt I'd taken home with me, and went for a walk on the park trails by the shore of the nearby lake. Other than a couple joggers and a mom and two boys climbing on play structures, the park was deserted. That gave me plenty of time to think. And I needed to think. I did best when I knew the questions that needed answers. Tilly's mind was flexible and worked at the speed of light. If I didn't have an outline to structure and focus our conversation, I would be at a disadvantage. I had no idea how she could justify her infidelity, but I had no doubt she would try. I believed she loved me, or at least thought she did, but damn it, I couldn't reconcile that with her behavior. So I walked, hearing the sound of the water walking leisurely to the shore, breathing in the smell of the lake, the slumbering grass, dirt and trees, breathing the crisp air. And I did what I do best, organized my thoughts into categories, and then tried to formulate basic questions. I discarded the trivial, distracting, or unimportant and refined the questions that would hopefully give me the answers I needed. I organized the questions in my mind. I refined them, supplemented them with clarifying wording. And when I got back to my hotel room, I wrote them down. I hadn't planned to read them to Tilly, but writing down ideas always cemented them in my mind. First, why did she think she could cross her vows, her commitment to me? I didn't expect her answer to satisfy me, but I still wanted to understand. Second, was she putting my health at risk? If so, she was at best frivolous to me and at worst cavalier. Third, how often had she slept with Randy? And were there others? She could try to hide her answer, but she was fundamentally an honest person. She couldn't lie. And I was good at recognizing lies. Fourth, why Randy? Did she love him? Did she want a relationship with him? Did she want to keep having fun with him? Fifth, how did her coworkers know about their liaisons? Were they blatant? Were they spouses at work? Was the company culture rotten with infidelity? And finally, how did she think we should proceed? Further action would not be entirely up to her, but I was curious to know what she thought should happen. I knew I needed to meet with Tilly, and I knew it had to be today or tomorrow. My first priority was to protect the children, and that meant that until Tilly and I made up our minds, the girls would need to go home with both parents. I felt mentally prepared, but I was still nervous. I needed to relax as much as possible, to focus my energy on the conversation rather than draining it into fussing and tossing around. The hotel had a small gym with a treadmill, and I walked around in jeans, a t-shirt, and dress shoes for another hour. Then I headed to Red Robin to eat a BLT and a side salad and drink coffee. Trained and fed up, I was more ready than ever. Next chapter. I woke up on the couch with a sore neck. I checked my phone, turning my head, but found nothing significant. I knew Aaron needed to deal with his feelings, but the longer he was out of touch, the harder the task would be. I vividly imagined him formulating and testing hypotheses, running through scenarios, desperately trying to find order in what he didn't understand. I felt strange being the object of his musings, and sad. Guilt was weighing on me. I knew I would be honest when Aaron came to me, and I knew my honesty would hurt him. I hoped it would also cleanse his wound. I wouldn't allow lies between us. Lying degrades and infects any intimate relationship. I lied to save someone's feelings if it didn't matter, but it was too important. Only the full truth could work. It could work. It all depended on Aaron. I made coffee and tried to put the looming conversation out of my mind. I was at my best when others thought I wasn't prepared enough, but anticipating possibilities always left me out. I had a knack for reading the moment and intuitively knowing what issues needed to be addressed. Plus, I was quick to formulate thoughts, so I didn't want to spend a lot of time thinking about topics and issues that might not come up. I wanted to save my energy for when it would matter. The morning dragged on and there was no word from Aaron. I called the family to see how the kids were doing and asked them to keep the girls another night, which they gladly did. Then, Annie wanted to talk to me. Daddy said we're going to celebrate tonight. Celebrating? I'm sorry, sweetie, but Daddy isn't feeling well tonight. But I promise we'll go as a family as soon as we can. But Daddy said tonight. Annie looked more like me, but in every other way she was her father's daughter. I know, sweetie, but sometimes we have to change plans when things happen. We'll get out as soon as we can. The silence dragged on until Mom picked up the phone again. She chuckled. Someone's not happy at all. She has the same angry face as you. Thanks, Mom. If anyone can handle her, it's you. There's nothing that can't be solved with a couple cookies. Tell Aaron we hope he gets better soon. I will. Give Kylie a hug, too. I loaded the laundry into the washer and then cleaned up the kitchen. I didn't feel like doing anything I couldn't quit once Aaron got home. The problem was that there weren't enough small things to keep me busy, so I started obsessing over Aaron. I kept reminding myself that I couldn't know his reaction until I saw him, so hanging around him was useless, but with nothing else to occupy myself with, I kept doing it. I thought about taking a shower, but I wanted him to see me as soon as he walked through the door. He needed to know that he was the most important person in the world to me, now and always. It could drive me crazy, but waiting for him was a small punishment, so I did it. But really, it could drive me crazy. I hate idleness. With nothing else to help pass the time, I immersed myself in memories. Memories of Aaron and me. They always made me happy. Our first date, standard dinner and a movie. He suggested Italian food for dinner, a safe choice, and inside Louis Davis, a risky one. We shared a huge lasagna, and I took home his spaghetti carbonara. We learned that we both like the Coen brothers, though I consider Raising Arizona their best movie, and he was fascinated by Barton Fink. To be honest, I never liked Barton Fink. His proposal. We'd already talked about getting married, and he'd missed a couple great opportunities, Christmas and New Year's, but then he found the perfect way. It was a normal Thursday night. We were at his house, and he had made penne alla vodka, his usual date dinner. He had rented the movie Arrival, and when it was over, he brought our conversation to the movie's central question. If you knew you were going to be heartbroken at the end, would you still go through with it? The movie was about his daughter's illness, but his conversation centered on a failed marriage. Would you still have gotten married knowing it could end badly? When I answered that I would, he got down on his knee, pulled out a ring and said, I would too. Prophetic answer, wasn't it? I certainly hoped not. And then, as if conjuring it up, I heard the garage door go up. I took 3 breaths, deep, 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 and sat down at the kitchen table so that the first thing he'd see when he walked in would be me. Next chapter. I opened the door from the garage to the kitchen and slipped inside. The first thing I saw was Tilly sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee in front of her. She looked tense. It looked like I wasn't the only one suffering. I had forgotten that this situation was new to her as well. Thank God you're home, honey. I was so worried about you. Are you all right? Can I get you something? Coffee? Lunch? Tilly's words sounded hurried, her concern obvious. No, I've already eaten. I'm going to go change. Then we'll talk. Okay, honey. I'm going to make scrambled eggs. I was too worried to eat. Are you sure you don't want any? I'm sure. Say! I glanced into the family room as I headed for the stairs. This room was the emotional center of our house, but I felt out of place. In fact, the whole house was out of sorts. I didn't notice anything special about it. The plaid on the sectional sofa was rolled up in a ball, I assumed, by Tilly. But the usual sense of solidity was absent. I always felt confident when I was at home, but that wasn't the case now. I think it was another result of her betrayal. My home no longer felt special to me. Our bedroom seemed stale, too. I unpacked my bag, placing my suit on a chair that seemed to be designed for storing clothes. T-shirts and jeans went into the laundry basket along with socks and boxers. I put the toiletries away and hung my sweatshirt in the closet. I pulled on sweatpants and a long-sleeve t-shirt, then added my favorite cotton sweater. I pulled on my Skechers sneakers and walked back into the kitchen. Tilly was standing at the stove stirring scrambled eggs that smelled delicious. No diner could replicate those scrambled eggs. The girls loved them. I sat down across from where she had left her mug. Tilly always preferred to sit together when we were discussing something important, but this situation was different. We were in opposite corners and it was unnerving, but sitting across from her, I could see her reaction. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I mentally analyzed my questions. I was more prepared than ever. Next chapter. When Aaron walked in, he looked, well, different. His clothes were mismatched, he wore his cordovan boots with jeans and a green hoodie, and he hadn't shaved, which wasn't like him at all. But I paid attention to his eyes. I didn't expect to see the usual joy that seeped over the edge every time he saw me, but I didn't see anger or resentment in them either. What I did see was distance, an almost clinical detachment. He was in business mode, and I needed him in husband mode, where we solved problems together as we made important decisions in our marriage and in our family. I had a lot of work to do. Thank God you're home, honey. I was so worried about you. Are you all right? Can I get you something? Coffee? Lunch? No, I've already eaten. I'm going to go change. We'll talk later. Definitely a businesslike attitude. Okay, honey. I'm going to make scrambled eggs. I was too worried to eat. Are you sure you don't want some? Yes. He went upstairs. I made scrambled eggs with 3 eggs with milk and salt, and then added some grated Parmesan. The girls loved scrambled eggs that way. Annie loved it, and Kylie loved it because that's what her older sister used to make. The scrambled eggs were slowly cooking when Aaron came back and sat down across from me. I heard him exhale slowly. This conversation was too important to start it this way. I needed him to relax, to sit next to me, to feel my love, to sense my sincerity. I don't want to do this in the kitchen, Aaron. I'll sing quickly and we can go to the family room. The family room held our pictures, the girls' toys, honeymoon souvenirs, and family gifts received from siblings and grandparents. It was our place of love, and he needed to feel that love. And so did I. Kitchen's fine. Shit. I couldn't argue with him. I didn't want to argue with him at all. We needed connections, not new rifts. But he wasn't making it easy. Okay, but can't we wait until I'm done eating? I want to give you my full attention. Sure. I stirred the eggs. Where were you staying last night? At the Residence Inn. I see you brought your bag with you. Will you be here tonight? I haven't decided yet. I told Annie we're going out as a family to celebrate your award. I called Mom and asked her to keep the kids one more night. I wasn't sure if you'd be home. I felt Aaron nod. Okay. How did Annie take the news? I laughed and felt him smile too. Exactly how you think. It was nice to talk about girls. I felt him relax a little. I set the scrambled eggs and sat down next to Aaron, which surprised him. Encouraged, I I touched his forearm. He flinched. I sighed. I'm sorry, Aaron. He shrugged. I ate quickly, not tasting the scrambled eggs. After putting my plate and fork in the dishwasher, I sipped my coffee and sat down next to him again. He pulled himself together and sat up a little straighter. In business mode. I have a few questions about your affair, Tilly. It wasn't an affair, dear. Call it whatever you want. I consider it an affair. Why did you do it? I can see how much I've hurt you with my actions, dear, and I will answer all your questions. But it meant nothing to me. I want you to realize that it just doesn't matter, to me or to us, but I don't know how to help you understand that. Why did you do it? The same reason I sometimes order steak for dinner and sometimes a salad. Randy's good-looking, funny, humble. He's just a fun guy. We got a big contract, so we went out to eat, had a few drinks to celebrate, flirted a bit, the usual. He raised his eyebrows, I laughed, got up, and we went to his room. I left when we were done. You didn't say why. I did, but I realized it was our Gordian knot. Usually our different approaches complemented each other, which was an enviable strength that helped us no matter the topic. This time, they worked against us. We knew each other well from close quarters, but if we were going to get through this as a team, we needed to get in touch with each other's reality. I needed him to really see that Randy, and the salesman for that matter, was as much of a threat to our marriage as working out at the gym. I'm trying to help you realize that my time with Randy was insignificant. Like what I ordered for dinner. It had nothing to do with you, our marriage, our family. We were on the road, and it just happened. I can argue against almost everything you just said, Till. It's important. It has everything to do with me, our marriage, and our family, and it didn't just happen. When we got married, you made commitments. Knowing that you broke them really shifted the ground beneath our feet. I've always honored my commitments to you, Aaron. Always. I love and cherish you now more than ever. I love you so much that it overwhelms me at times. This thing with Randy doesn't mean anything. It means everything. What does it mean? I wasn't here. You didn't miss anything. And when I came home, I was just as loving, attentive, supportive, and involved as I've always been. It didn't change me or our marriage or our family one bit. You lied to me. I didn't lie to you. I've never lied to you about anything important. Withholding the truth about something important is the same as lying about it. Exactly. It wasn't important. I don't tell you when I work out on the road, what I eat for breakfast, what cars I rent. It was exactly the same. It didn't mean anything. I wouldn't lie to you, honey, about anything that mattered. He inhaled slowly and closed his eyes for a moment. Revision. Did you use a condom? His question surprised me a little. I thought I was making progress in his understanding, so the change in direction of the conversation threw me off balance. Nevertheless, I promised to answer all of his questions. It wasn't going to be easy, but I knew that at some point it would all come out. Not the first time. After that, yes. And how many times was that? I've been with Randy 3 times. Aaron clenched his jaws. On the one hand, I hoped anger would cloud his thoughts, but on the other, ripping off the Band-Aid was usually the best way out. He didn't miss my accuracy. Have you ever been with anyone else? Only with one man. Once. Years ago. I met him at a hotel and we started a relationship. With no one else but him and Randy. I see. He was furious. His eyes were dark and cold and his face tense. But now all my dirty laundry was out in the open. I just had to help him realize how little it mattered to everything we'd created together. Have you been tested for STDs? What, no? My first boyfriend and I used a condom, and Randy and I only used one once without one. So you've put my health at risk. No, honey, no. I'm sure Randy hasn't had anything. He hasn't been with anyone but his wife. What if he lied? What if she's having fun like you are? Ouch. I almost answered, but caught my tongue in time. I had hurt him, very badly. He was going to get his revenge. I sighed. I needed to be understanding, but it still hurt. I had an unprotected affair over a year ago, but I'll get tested if you want. It's the least you can do. Okay, I'll set it up. Anything to make you feel better. It's not likely to make me feel better, but it's one less thing to worry about. He frowned, then relaxed and nodded quickly. So you've had contact with Randy 3 times in the last year. Yes, but it's not what you're imagining. It was never planned. We went on probably a dozen trips together during that time. When it happened, it was only because we were both in the mood. We only did it once each time. We never spent the night together. We never shared a room. Are you in love with Randy? In love? God, no. I mean, I like him, but I'm in love with you. I could never love him, or anyone else. You're my man, my partner, the love of my life. But you're having fun with Randy, and someone else. I sighed again. How do I make him forget about this and realize there wasn't an ounce of love in all of this? It was entertainment, like going to a movie or a concert. I hated seeing him so upset, all because of me. I had to find the words that would heal him. I don't know how to make you realize that every one of those times was nothing, just an itch. What can I do to help you understand? I understand. You think sex can be casual, no attachment, no emotion. Yes, you see that. I felt my insides unleash. Maybe we could get through this crisis. I see it. I just don't agree. Come on, honey. Yeah, but no matter how we do it, I always do it with you, and only with you. That's what makes it special. It's special to me too. It's wonderful. It feels so good. But you have fun with other guys too. He was still confused. I didn't know how many ways to say it, but I had to keep trying. And it doesn't mean anything to me. And it does to me. He covered his mouth with his hand and squinted his eyes in concentration. Switched gears again. I was about to speak, but he beat me to it. How many people know about this? What do you mean? No one knows about it. He snorted derisively. People definitely know about it. How do you think I know about it? Of all the questions he could have asked, this one I hadn't even considered. It hadn't even crossed my mind. It was enough that Aaron knew. I guess I thought he must have figured it out on his own since he was so good at it, but I never thought anyone else could have told him. I was stunned. Who told you? No one told me. I overheard Ted Winters saying something about it to another guy last night. I guess it wasn't a secret to them. Wow. I was stunned. My coworkers knew? It was like a full-blown disaster. I knew immediately where this was going. My professional reputation was at serious risk. At least some of my team knew I'd slept with a subordinate, which could mean personnel problems, which in turn could mean disciplinary action from Jim and Frank. And what about Randy? He could have made a harassment claim, although I was sure I could eventually live up to that accusation. But his wife was standing with us when Aaron dropped his bombshell, so he could be having his own family crisis right now. And in a stressful situation, people can be very jumpy. I shook my head. I loved my job, but in the end it was just a job. A job. I'd deal with the job when Aaron and I resolved our issues. Aaron was my husband, my true love, my anchor, my partner. We needed to fix our marriage. Everything else didn't matter as much as that. I really needed to tap into his love for me, to show him that nothing had changed between us because of my affairs. Honey, it doesn't matter who else knows. You know, and I can see how much you're hurting. I want to help you heal from the pain. You caused that pain yourself, Tilly. I don't believe you can ease it. His words made my heart clench in my throat. Before I could respond, he said, "What do you think is going on here?" Thank God. His question had just put me on the firmest of ground. I love you more now than I ever have, Air. And tomorrow I'll love you even more. It's just noise, honey. I know it hurts, but I can spare you that pain. It's nothing compared to the love we have for each other, for the family we've built together. We have a beautiful future ahead of us. Everything we've always talked about. I know you are hurting and that we have a lot of work to do, but I know that we will get through it. I'm more certain now than ever that we're destined to spend the rest of our lives together. He didn't say anything back. He was staring off into the distance, and his face remained impassive. Let's go to the family room and sit together. I miss your touch, your hugs. We always feel better when we touch each other. You'll see that nothing has changed. I'm perfectly fine staying here. He didn't move, and I don't mean the kitchen. He wasn't out of his business mode, and that couldn't work. We saw the world differently, and we never will. I couldn't bridge the intellectual gap. I needed to make him realize that our feelings, our emotional connections, were important, and that they were strong and stable. He was in a lot of heartache, and it could only be healed with emotional support. He wasn't going to rationalize his path to recovery. Honey, your pain is very intense, and it is overwhelming you right now. Please don't shut me out. Let me help you find your center. Feel my support. He stood up, and I stood up with him. Then he plowed into me. I'm not going to make any decision right now. I need time to think about it. I'll let you know when I'm ready to discuss it further. Next chapter. I wanted to drive back to the park. I loved being outside, especially when I needed to vent my energy, but I'd gone without a jacket, and it was the last days of fall. So I drove to the mall and walked a circle on each level. Twice. Then I snacked on a slice of pepperoni at Slice Brothers. It wasn't healthy, but screw it. I had all the answers that mattered. Tilly was having fun with Randy, but she wasn't going to run off with him. She was sincere in saying she still loved me. But she'd had fun with Randy several times and once with a stranger, so how could I judge that? And the frequency of encounters with Randy was increasing, though 3 data points weren't enough for high confidence. But practice makes perfect. Tilly seemed genuinely shocked that other people knew about her interludes, but the fact remained that other people knew she had cheated on me. It wasn't a big deal, but it was a consideration. No one wants to look like a fool. If we had stayed married, I would have met these people from time to time. She was also, at least once, unprotected. Clearly not thinking about the husband who waits faithfully for her at home. She claimed to love me, but her actions made the implications of that love murky to me. Everything I heard pointed to casual, mercantile sex on her part. There was no way I could understand that. I understood the principle, but deep down I didn't understand how anyone would think sex wasn't that important. I wouldn't judge others if they came to a clear agreement with their partner, but my partner had never provided such an agreement. We talked about exclusivity in the beginning, and we agreed. But either we weren't very clear on the concept, or Tilly felt there was a loophole somewhere that I couldn't see. She wanted to move forward, to stay in the marriage, but it sounded like, do no harm and don't mess up. That the focus was on dealing with my pain, essentially ignoring responsibility for my transgressions. Perhaps because she didn't see them as transgressions. What was I supposed to do now? I loved Tilly. I always have. We had everything in common. Well, almost everything. We were intertwined. Separating us would have been incredibly painful and incredibly difficult on almost every level. We were best friends. We had children in common. Families we loved and who loved us. The same with friends, home, a share in a vacation cabin, investments, retirement plans, and all of our shared dreams. Divorce sucks, a lot. Both the process and the aftermath. I didn't see anything good in divorce. But when it was over, I could regain my confidence and maybe find a partner more in line with my values. It was by no means a one-size-fits-all outcome, but I was a decent guy, sincere, hardworking, reliable. There had to be women who valued that enough to remain faithful. Tilly's betrayal hurt me very deeply. I was at a complete loss as to how she thought it was acceptable to bully me. And although she seemed to genuinely sympathize with my pain, I never heard her apologize for having fun with those guys. She just said it didn't mean anything. The pain I felt last night was now muted, but I knew it would come back again and again. The feelings of inadequacy, of stupidity, of rejection had been spewed out, exhausted, but they were gathering again, and when they gained enough strength, they would return in full force. I hoped these feelings would dull with time, but I didn't share Tilly's confidence that they could be cured. And I knew I would never trust her not to lose her way again. Trust. Every relationship is built on a foundation of trust. Will you do what you promise? We risk our time, our money, our feelings when we believe in someone, when we trust them. I trusted Tilly completely. I honored my commitments to her. But she didn't do the same for me. It tipped the scales of our marriage heavily toward her. And I couldn't think of a way to redress the balance. I wasn't going to have an affair. And that's how I saw Tilly's infidelity, as an end to her commitment to me. I wanted her to convince me that we should stay married. I needed her to do that because I couldn't understand it myself. I needed to talk to her again. I drove home. Next chapter. After Aaron left, I took a shower. I ate a piece of toast with the rhubarb jam his mom had sent at the end of the summer. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. I tried not to think about our situation, but my thoughts were racing anyway. I just had to find a way out for Aaron. For me. For him. For our children. How could I make him realize that what mattered was our marriage, our family? Having fun with Randy and the salesman was nothing compared to that. Not even just in comparison. I never thought about it once it was over. It had been hours since he'd left when I heard the sound of the garage door again. I quickly put the plate, knife, and coffee cup in the dishwasher and hurried into the family room. We weren't going to have another conversation sitting at the kitchen table. Our family room had an L-shaped sectional sofa, and the TV and shelves that held all of our family's important books and knickknacks were in the open section. We had no other seating in the room. I sat in the middle of the couch, so no matter where he sat, Aaron was within my reach. Feeling my love through touch would help him see my devotion to him and our family. Till? Here. Aaron hesitated when he saw me, then walked over and sat in the chair closest to the doorway. I smiled at him. I couldn't help it. I liked this man. He gave me a curt nod and then turned away. Pain radiated from him. I walked over and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. He tensed, but didn't pull away. I squeezed and then brought my hand back. In small steps. Where did you go? To the mall. Can I get you something to drink? No, I'm fine. Okay. I looked at him, waiting, but he didn't look up. What are you thinking about, sweetheart? Aaron shrugged. I just don't understand. Why? I told you. It was nothing, honey. Nothing at all. And certainly nothing to do with you. It had everything to do with me, Till. Everything. No, Aaron. You were here, I was there, and it meant nothing to me at all. He nodded regretfully. And there it is, it seems. A difference I hadn't noticed before. When we're not in the same place, I still think about us being together. Inseparable, even when distance gets in the way. And what's the point of that, sweetheart? We can't be inseparable when we're not together. I smiled at him. I thought literalism was your thing. Are you kidding? Teasing had always been our way of brightening the mood, but we were much further apart than I feared. That realization shook me. I'm sorry. I don't know what to do here, Air. I don't know how to show you how unimportant any of this is. I feel like our marriage is in jeopardy. I can see that you're hurting, and I'm hurt. But I don't know what to say to make it better. Why did you do that? He was so wrapped up in this that he couldn't hear what I was saying. So I repeated. I told you, honey. The circumstances were right, and it just happened. It doesn't mean anything. Aaron sighed, and it seemed to release all his energy. He usually sat up straight, but now he just went limp. It doesn't mean anything to you. But to me, it means a hell of a lot. Why? I almost shouted in annoyance. It doesn't concern you at all. If you hadn't heard Ted say something last night, you'd still be happy in our marriage, right? He shrugged. Yeah, I would have been. You know I would. And I'm still the same woman. Still your wife. Still devoted to your happiness and our family? I'm exactly the same as I was yesterday when you were happy with me. I don't understand how you can't see that. And I don't understand how you can't realize that while you may be the same woman you were yesterday, I thought you were the same woman I married before you had fun with anyone but me. You promised to be exclusive, Till, and you weren't. You promised. But I was. I've never loved anyone but you, Aaron. Never. It was like that when we met, when we were engaged, when we got married. Every day since I met you, I haven't loved anyone else. I thought our conversation was finally getting on track, but Aaron looked more and more sad. He nodded, but it was a resigned nod. He moved to stand up, but I did it faster and put my arms around him. I rested my forehead against his shoulder. No. Stay with me. We can fix this. We have to fix this. He relaxed enough to stay seated, but remained tense enough not to press into me. Nothing can be fixed, Till. I can see that our marriage has always been like this. And what does that mean? To me, our commitment to each other was total, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and physical. You've never perceived it the same way. You are attached to me emotionally, maybe even intellectually and spiritually, but not physically. We were never in balance, Till. I thought we were, but we weren't. And I don't see how we can bring it into balance. But we are in balance, sweetheart. I know you love me. I feel it every day. And I love you just as much. No, you don't. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having fun. There it was again. Aaron was a smart guy. Why couldn't he see that? I needed him to see that. What I did with Randy and the other guy really had nothing to do with you. As soon as it was over, it slipped my mind. I don't care about them at all. I care about you. I love you more than anyone I've ever met. You are my perfect partner. Tilly, I carry our marriage with me wherever I go. It's fused with me, with my personality. You and the kids, but especially you, are always at the forefront of my thoughts when I need to make a decision. I choose everything with you in mind. In everything. When I'm deciding what to take for lunch, I think about what we have planned for dinner. When someone asks me if I want tickets to a game, I check the calendar to see if we have plans. Then I think about what you'd like to do with me at that time, and only if there are no possible conflicts do I think about whether I want to go. It happens automatically. But when you decided to entertain some other man, where was the thought of me? At best, you didn't think about me at all, because if you did and went for it anyway, you'd just be a calculating bitch. And I don't think you are. A calculating bitch? That made me sink back on my heels. It hurt more than anything I could have imagined. Tears came to my eyes. He was so far from the truth. I really did love him, more than anything in the world. How could I convince him? Aaron, you have to know how much I love you. You must. Open your heart, my love. You will see the truth there. I don't think you want to see what's in my heart right now, Till. Trust your feelings, Air. Look into your heart, and you'll see the truth of how much I love you. Love isn't the only feeling out there, Tilly. It's not even the most significant. There's pain in there, too. Anger, fear, and grief. A lot of grief. But why? I squeezed him again, but he continued to sit still. Let me in, Air. Let me in. We can heal this. We can. I will heal, and you will undoubtedly be a part of it, but I don't see it happening right now. We're out of balance, Till. And until I know if we can ever regain our balance, I can't be with you. He gently unclasped my hands, then stood up. I'm going to pack some things. I'll let you know where I end up. It was such a nightmare. I watched him walk away and his whole body looked defeated. We had to make things right, but he had to want to fix it, and it didn't look like he wanted to. I was frustrated, saddened, scared. How do I get through to him? Next chapter. I went back to the residence inn. I texted Tilly when I checked back in. I listened to her and heard everything she said and didn't say. For Tilly, emotional commitment was all that mattered. She truly believed that having fun with other guys meant essentially nothing away from our marriage. She would come home believing she was still faithful to me because the fun never interfered with her feelings for me, our children, or our family. It was separate, outside of our commitments and plans. I never found out about her infidelity because she had no guilt. To her, it was just entertainment, no different than going to a restaurant with friends. But it was not at all in line with what I thought marriage should be. I was open to reconciliation, but I just didn't see how we could get to that point. I was never going to cheat on Tilly, so the only way to move forward with my relationship with her was to accept her betrayal and forgive her for it. And that always caused the scales in our marriage to tip. Combined with her lack of remorse and her philosophy that there are exceptions in life, I had no confidence that she wouldn't do it again. And I knew I couldn't take it. She didn't believe she had betrayed me, but I could feel it, and the pain it caused seemed bottomless. And how do you deal with your partner looking for entertainment elsewhere? The person whose love is most important to you. You have built every aspect of your life around her and your marriage to her, dedicating your life to her, creating children and a shared home. You trust her with your fears and insecurities, knowing that she loves you in spite of them, and that love is manifested in the fact that you share your bodies with each other. It is a tangible expression of your mutual love. You know that she loves only you because she only makes love to you. Until you discover that guarding and honoring your love is not that important to her. Until you realize that you are not enough for her. Until you find out that she is not willing to sacrifice a fleeting feeling for the sake of your marriage. The gap between your expectations and her behavior is huge, and the pain that gap gives birth to is proportionately huge. I screamed into my pillow again that night about my emotional agony, and for many nights that followed. It was the only way to let it out, and it exhausted me to the point of exhaustion. I talked to my boss and explained in general terms that my marriage seemed to be coming to an end and that I needed time to cope. Maxine was always sympathetic, and this time was no different. She simply asked me to look after the emails while I did what I needed to do. We went out with the girls to celebrate Tilly's promotion, and the excitement of the kids helped us keep dinner light and mostly normal. We got home together, and Tilly and I did our usual nightly preparations with the girls. When they had settled into bed, read to each other, and kissed a few times, I got my coat. "When are you coming home, Air?" "I don't know." "I miss you." "Yeah, you too." "Can we talk about this?" "I don't think we have anything to say." "I know what you're thinking. Now I just need to figure out what I think." "Let's go home, honey. Let me talk it over with you, like we always do. You know we make a great team." "It won't work this time, Till." I did come to the house after work every night and morning of my days to get the girls ready. We wanted to keep things as normal as possible for as long as possible. Weekends were more difficult, but we managed. I would arrive before Annie and Kylie woke up. They no longer gave us surprises in bed, but since everything else was constant for them, they didn't seem to notice. I felt myself drifting away from Tilly, and she felt it too. She begged me to come home, tried to convince me that we could go on living together like we used to. Finally, one night when we had put the girls to bed, she surprised me. "Let's go to counseling, honey. We're stuck, and we need help. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll just leave us for good." I found it interesting that she thought it was as if I was leaving her, even though I felt she had never put as much into our marriage as I had. My second thought was that our dissimilar views were a great reason to try therapy. She found a counselor, and after a cursory review of online reviews and her credentials, I agreed. Pratishta Bhandari was an earthy woman, busty but with bright and active eyes and a soothing voice that had just a hint of an accent. Her manner was not straightforward. She took the time to ascertain our thoughts and feelings about this or that matter under discussion, but did not hesitate to ask questions that penetrated to the heart of the matter when the main work was done. And she was very articulate and precise in her expressions, especially where emotions were concerned. Toward the end of the second session, Pratishta brought us to the stumbling block. We talked about our history together and what I had recently learned about Tilly's infidelity. There were no surprises for either of us, but Pratishta had already begun to draw out the contours of our marriage in her mind. Please correct me if I am wrong, but it seems that you, Tilly, consider your promises to Aaron intact because having fun with other men has not affected your emotional attachment to him. Tilly nodded and smiled. Yes. And you, Aaron, think she betrayed those promises because to you, they included physical fidelity, not just emotional fidelity. Yes. And Tilly, you don't think you need forgiveness because you don't think you've done anything you need to be forgiven for. Tilly frowned. No, I hurt Aaron, and I feel bad about it. I want him to forgive me for hurting him. So you regret doing it with other men because it hurt Aaron? Exactly. I regret it very much. I never meant to hurt my husband. Aaron, what do you think about what Tilly is saying? I know she regrets hurting me. She's not a monster. She knows she hurt me. Severe pain. And she's made it clear that she's sorry for my pain. But she has never apologized for the actions that created that pain because she doesn't think they were wrong. That's not true, exclaimed Tilly. I do apologize for them. I didn't mean to hurt you. Tilly, it's Aaron's turn to share what he thinks and feels. You'll get your chance too. No, I'm done. She only regrets them because they hurt me. She doesn't see them as a betrayal per se. I do. And that tells me she might do it again. I don't know if I can live through that pain now. It would kill me to face it again. But I wouldn't. Tilly, you are who you are. A wonderful, intelligent, warm-hearted woman. But you believe in exceptions, exceptions, exceptions. No absolutes, right? But for me, it's a hard absolute. And it always has been, which is why it hurts me so much to know that you don't believe in our marriage as much as I do. And if I have to defend myself against you, then it's not the marriage I want. You're not a bad person, Tilly, but I don't think you're the right person for me to marry. Honey, please give me a chance. I can do it. Maybe you can. But do you really believe that there will be no exceptions for the rest of your life? That there are absolutely no circumstances under which you might consider having fun with another man? Tilly had always been honest. Maybe not always completely honest, but honest. And I saw in her eyes the very moment she thought of a possible exception. And she saw in my eyes that I saw it, and I think in that same moment she realized it was over between us. Next chapter. I can't believe we're divorced. Aaron and I were soulmates, absolutely perfect for each other, but we are no longer married. I was there for him every step of the way, starting with that horrible night at the hotel, and every day it seemed like we were falling further and further down the rabbit hole. I still can't fathom what happened, and for the most insignificant of reasons. I never gave others a fraction of the love I felt for Aaron. Never. I was sure counseling would help us. Pratishta made us see our disconnect, but where I was sure we could overcome it, Aaron didn't see a way forward. And I think he just stopped trying. I begged and pleaded with him to come home, to make love to me, to trust in the cocoon of love we had built for ourselves and our children, but he was undeterred. I see the possibilities. I always have. And I am a creative person. So when Aaron asked me if I could ever see an exception to the rule for staying monogamous, I of course came up with one. In fact, I came up with several almost immediately. Being stranded after a plane crash, being forced to save Annie, Kylie, or Aaron's life, a couple swap with Aaron's consent, and perhaps the occasional stroke of thunder. I'm sure I could have come up with more. But these were exceptions. The likelihood of them happening was, by definition, extremely low. I tried to explain this. But the probability is not zero, Till. And with the addition of each possible exception, the overall risk of you entertaining someone else again increases. I can't live with that hanging over our marriage. I can't. You've drained me, Tilly. I don't have the reserves to survive another blow. And he, in turn, devastated me. I was depressed for months after he filed for divorce, but I had to put on pants every day to support our girls and win clients for our firm. I didn't have the opportunity to mope, and since I'm a proponent of the fake it till you make it approach to problems, I put on my best face every day. But nights alone in my bed were hard, and when the girls were at Aaron's, we shared custody, splitting the weeks between us. I ate many pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream and cried. A lot. Aaron wasn't any easier. I knew him so well and saw his deep sadness. His cheerful, casual demeanor evaporated, and he looked so pensive and even lost when he wasn't talking to someone. But no matter how often I begged him to come home, he didn't. Eventually, I realized that he had to come back to me on his own. Anything I could say wouldn't change anything. And maybe that's when I realized how much I had hurt him. He always looked to me for advice. He trusted my judgment. At least he used to. Now he didn't. By the time I was ready to date, Randy was gone. He was divorced, too. His wife Trish heard Aaron very clearly that night. Randy was caught off guard, and he wasn't able to present the news in a way that helped him. His divorce was much less successful than ours. Aaron and I had parted amicably and maintained our friendship for the sake of the children, but Trish had turned on Randy with fierce rage. They had young children too, but she got custody, and he got the bill. He left our firm when a competitor had a sales manager position open, but he had to move to Chicago to do so. I felt as sorry for him as I did for myself. The entertainment wasn't worth the price, but I wondered why he was so expensive for all concerned. I didn't have to face any repercussions at work. I told Jim and Frank a simplified version of the reason for my divorce and assured them that I would no longer put the firm at risk. They let me know they were disappointed, but I was a source of income for them, and I'm sure they looked the other way not only because of that, but because of the favor they felt for me. I started dating about a year after my divorce was finalized. Men started asking me out as soon as my impending divorce became known, but it took just as long before I was ready to accept that my marriage was probably over. I felt very lonely, and so I took another dip in the pool, agreeing to dates with several different men. I didn't sleep with any of them. I kept hoping that Aaron would come back, and I wanted to be able to tell him that I had been faithful. The irony didn't escape me. I wasn't faithful when we were married, but I was faithful when it was over. After another year of separation, it seemed that Aaron had found the center of his life. I didn't know if he was dating anyone. We didn't discuss dating, and although I never asked the girls directly, there were no women in their memories of spending time with Aaron. But when we did see each other, he seemed relaxed, and if he didn't seem completely happy, he at least seemed content. By then, I had given up hope of us being together, and it helped that I was open to other people. That led me to Bob. We met through work. He had a family office and I sold him our services. I took him out to dinner to celebrate the sale, and then he took me out to dinner to talk more personally. He had been a widower for 4 years, about 10 years older than me, and he had no children. He wasn't against them. His wife couldn't conceive a child. He grieved for 2 years and then gradually opened his heart. I was able to empathize with him. Bob basically healed me. I will always have a scar from Aaron's rejection, but Bob was gentle, caring, and funny. He wasn't handsome. He was plain, not large or small, not particularly noticeable, but his heart was big and warm, and it just enveloped me. He also saw everything in shades of gray and said he couldn't imagine how a perfect marriage could be ruined by a couple episodes of meaningless entertainment. I didn't know how I would feel if Aaron was the first of us to start living with a new partner, so I was very nervous before I told him that Bob and I would be living together. However, our conversation was anticlimactic. Aaron was magnanimous. "I'm glad you found someone, Till." He smiled at me, genuinely pleased. "You've always had great taste in partners, so I'm sure he's a good man." I couldn't help myself. I pounced on him and hugged him, but he tensed in my embrace. I sighed. He would never let go of the pain I had caused him. Bob and I bought a 4-bedroom house not far from where Aaron and I lived. We wanted a fresh start. During and after the divorce, I stayed in our old house so the kids would have as quiet a life as possible, and Aaron bought a 3-bedroom condo nearby in the same school district. The kids had almost no trouble fitting Bob into our lives. I think mostly because he was so malleable and because Annie was still a couple years away from teenage rebellion. I still think about Aaron often. I want him to be happy. I hope that one day he will be happy. I try not to dwell on what could have been, if only. If only he was more flexible. If only he had been more open. If only he'd let me help him heal from his pain. But then he probably wouldn't be Aaron, my perfect partner. My almost perfect partner. Next chapter. I'd met Bob, but I'd never talked to him beyond simple pleasantries when I picked up or dropped off the girls. He seemed like a decent guy, maybe a little boring, which, from what I could tell, was a little rich. I was at his house, his and Tilly's, for Kylie's 8th birthday party, and we were the only two men there. Tilly and a few other moms were racing a dozen or so berserk girls around the yard, and neither they nor the kids needed two older guys, so we sat in camping chairs on the patio and watched the madness. We had already recounted the twins' failures, assessed the Vikings' chances, lamented last week's hot weather, and that was the end of harmless topics of conversation. We were quiet for a minute or two, sipping Molson, when Bob spoke up. I don't want to put you on the spot, Aaron, but how could you let Tilly get away? I mean, look at her. She's beautiful, smart, funny. She's a great mom, an amazing cook, and an incredible lover. She's the complete package. In the years since the dissolution of our marriage, I have given this a lot of thought. He was right in his observations. Tilly was an impressive woman. She also gutted me, and it took me several years of therapy to realize that I was better off without the doubts she brought into my life. A partner is supposed to make things easier, smoother, lift you up. Doubt in a partner is insidious. It poisons every moment, adding stress rather than relieving it. I couldn't live with it, and my grief over the loss of my marriage kept me from realizing this truth for a while. But when I realized it, I felt so at peace. I shrugged. We just weren't right for each other. I like to think I would have fought to keep a woman like that, not cast her aside. I hope you never have to do that, Bob. He shook his head. He didn't understand anything either. I smiled and sipped my beer. They were better suited for each other than Tilly and me? That thought didn't bother me. I was done with Tilly and I was glad she was done with me. Despite the pain I felt over her betrayal, I didn't want her to suffer. She didn't want to hurt me. She just wasn't the right partner for me. Besides, I had a secret. I had met Deirdre, Dee, about 9 months before. After my divorce, I'd taken up self-improvement, taking cooking classes, joining a book club, and buying a road bike for cycling. Dee and I met on a group ride and rode at about the same pace, so we spent most of the ride together. We sat next to each other over the cup of coffee that we ended each ride with, and 2 weeks later, we did it again. She was witty and knowledgeable about many things that interested me as well, so the following Sunday I took her out for a walk through an art museum and then lunch. That led to dinners, movies, and, after 5 date nights, that very night. Dee worked as a project manager for Verizon, had been divorced for 6 years and had a 10-year-old daughter, which put Nadine between Annie and Kylie. Tall and slender, Dee was usually brimming with playful energy, but when something needed to be done, she was all business. As you'd expect from a project manager who was basically a single mom, her ex left Nadine every weekend, she was very organized and a bit bossy. We had a surprising number of common interests. We had the Strokes and Muse on our playlists. Pulp Fiction topped our best movies list. I liked it because of Willem Dafoe and Dee liked it because of Uma Thurman. And we were pragmatically progressive politicians. After all, we live in Minnesota. When we were together, we found that time flew by unnoticed, and we were both committed to monogamy. We kept a low profile, mostly to make sure we were compatible before having children. I don't know how long Tilly dated Bob before introducing him to girls, but I wanted to make sure that my relationship with Dee was destined to last before I took that step. And we almost did. A couple weeks before, Dee and I had traveled to Duluth to meet my folks at their summer cottage. She charmed them, and we left feeling very supported. We didn't want to distract from Kylie's birthday, so we decided to wait until the following week to break the news to our daughters. We weren't sure when we would have a face-to-face meeting, but it didn't have to be too soon after that. And then, who knew for sure? The end of my marriage to Tilly was as horrible as I feared, but on the other side of that horrible path, I felt both stronger and wiser. With Dee, I felt confident and completely at peace. No matter which side I looked at our relationship from, it was a true, balanced relationship. And I liked it to stay that way. The end. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.